Thank you so much for giving us some of your time here. I know this is a topic that I love talking about, and I feel like is something that really needs to be brought to the surface, for a lot of people who are tuning in for this interview series. And, of course, people who are tuning in are going to be struggling. They consistently have a struggle with like anxiety, anxiety in general, anxiety in relationships, feeling good about who they are. Often I hear complaints with my own clients, not being able to feel good about who they are when they look in the mirror, and their confidence and their self-esteem. So, Darlene, can you tell the audience and tell us a little bit more about yourself, who you are, and what motivates you to write and do all the work that you do?
Well, I've been a marriage and family therapist for over 30 years, and I started writing books. I was writing before that, but I started writing books around 2011 when Wiley Publications asked me to write Codependency for Dummies. And then I, because of my own journey in overcoming codependency and my clinical experience and research and everything, what I learned was that some of the things that are needed to overcome codependency are just learning new skills. And one of those is learning self-esteem. It's not exactly a skill, but it's something that's learned in childhood, low self-esteem, and then you can learn to raise your self-esteem by taking certain actions. So I wrote an ebook on 10 steps to self-esteem, the ultimate guide to stop self-criticism, because self-criticism really can undermine your self-esteem and put you into a depression. And then learning to be assertive, because how you speak reflects your self-esteem, and your self-esteem impacts whether you can be assertive or not. So those were the first two ebooks I wrote. And then I discovered that most of the people that were interested in my work were living in an abusive relationships, predominantly with narcissists. And so I wrote an ebook on dealing with a narcissist. And currently I'm working on a paperback that's going to be more comprehensive. It's dating, loving, and leaving a narcissist. And then people with low self-esteem and shame struggle with guilt. Guilt is a manifestation of shame. They're different, but it creates more irrational guilt. And so then I wrote a handbook on overcoming guilt. And all my ebooks are workbooks. So I kind of get right down to the nitty-gritty. There's not a lot of fluff and case examples. It's just like homework that you can do on yourself. And if you're in therapy, you can do the exercises and bring them to your therapist, I'd say. And then codependents are often perfectionistic.
Yes, exactly. I'm so glad you hit that word. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
And I suffered from that myself. Before I was a therapist, I was a lawyer. And, I'd worry if I was a typo in my letters or whatever. And then I got to the point where I would just cross something out or correct it. And my secretaries would be all upset. No, I can't send out the letter, with a typo in it or crossed out something or other. And so I had personal experience on that. And I discovered that there's different kinds of perfectionism, and there's no problem with striving to do well and doing your best, but perfectionism is a compulsion. And when we do less than these idealized standards that aren't even realistic, it affects our self-esteem when you're a perfectionist. So, and that's there's actually positive and negative perfectionism. Anyway, that's another topic. So I wrote an ebook on overcoming perfectionism. What else? And then I produced some audio files on self-love, which is the core of overcoming codependency. And more recently, one is soul alignment meditation. Because when you're unhappy in your life, or in an unhappy relationship, or your work, you're not aligned with your soul. And when you're not being yourself and speaking your truth, also you're not being authentic and you're not aligned with your soul. So actually, recovery, you could describe it as a process of not only individuation, but coming into alignment with your soul, which is your true self and who you are.
I
And I
love
go
that.
into that more in my new website, darlenelancer.com. So
Darlene, can you
that's
tell
kind of a summary.
That's wow. You said so much there. And I kind of want to hit on a couple of things. You know, for this audience who's kind of just discovering all of this and maybe you're trying to figure out where does this perfectionism come from, you know, can you talk about a little bit like who is someone who is codependent? Like, how do you know whether you're codependent?
Well, I can give you a definition, but it's hard maybe to apply it when you're codependent because one of the core symptoms is denial. So,
Yes.
people say, oh, I know someone who's so codependent. How can I help them and fix them?
Let me rescue. I got this, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. So codependents are in denial of their own codependency. Often they're in denial that they're in an abusive relationship, which is me. I was for many years.
Yeah.
And they're in denial of their feelings, their needs, repressed, things from their childhood, perhaps. So denial is a core symptom. And the definition that I've decided on was that someone whose thinking and behavior revolve around someone else or another process or a substance. So I include people that are addicted to substances or eating disorder or gambling, which would be a process, as codependent also. And those issues might not show up in the relationship until they get clean or abstain from their addiction. And then you see the underlying codependency. So a codependent doesn't act, and their thinking and is not revolving around, it's revolving around something else, but it's not coming from their innate self. So there's dissociated or from their true self, who they really are. And I remember when I was in high school, for some reason, my teacher selected me to go and talk to a researcher that was interviewing some students on some project. And we sat in a room and she turned on a tape recorder and said, talk. And I had no idea what was going on or what I should talk about.
Yeah.
And after a while, I just got bored with the whole thing. And so I just started talking about everyone in my family. I didn't say a word about myself. It didn't even occur to me, period, to do that. And then, I was married to an alcoholic for many years.
Yeah.
And when I first got a sponsor in Al-Anon, eventually I got a sponsor, and I would talk to my sponsor and I would report to her how my husband was doing. And that was, and that's how I worked my program for like a first year, before I had any clue about talking about myself or what I was feeling, or figuring out what I needed was even much later. And by the way, I wrote a handbook on working the 12 steps, whether it's CODA or actually AA or anything. It's not religious, and it's not tied to one particular 12-step program. It's spiritual and it's psychological. So it's following the theories of Jung, but it incorporates the 12 steps and other spiritual literature. So you can use that if you want to use it as a workbook. So, so someone, you ask, how do you know if you're codependent? So some of the things might be you have a lot of anxiety about what people are going to think. You have trouble saying no.
Boundaries, right?
Yeah, that's
None.
right.
Or not being able to
Boundaries. Right. And you don't feel good about yourself. Now, not everybody is conscious of that. For a long time, I thought I had good self-esteem, and I didn't. I was actually teaching classes in self-esteem, and little did I know that I had shame underneath.
Yeah.
And wrote a book on conquering shame. It's a paperback, and that's the core symptom. So if you're hard, people would say, oh, you're hard on yourself. I didn't know what they were talking about. So if you're telling yourself, oh, I should have done that, I shouldn't have done that, and you think you're never doing enough, you're doing more than half the work in the relationship, you're always trying harder, that's a sign that there's something amiss with your self-esteem, and that might be a sign of codependency. I mentioned perfectionism. And if you're depressed too, if you don't find enjoyment in life, we mentioned if you're in a relationship where you're not getting your needs met, or you keep dating people that are unavailable, and you keep thinking that, there's no good partners out there. I just have to find the perfect person. Maybe there's a reason why you keep seeking unavailable partners, or you're committed in a relationship and the person is emotionally unavailable even though you're married to them. What's up with that? Because codependents have problems with intimacy.
Exactly.
And often you think, oh, it's the other person. If only they'll be able to be intimate. But there's a reason why the two of you are together. And I've written more about intimacy. It's a favorite topic of mine, and attachment styles. You're second guessing yourself a lot.
Yeah, that's just a habit, right? Like I know, as a hypnotist, I'm working with habits, and I notice this in myself as well. It's like I do something and then I find myself, oh, did I do it right? Did I do it good enough? Was I interesting enough? Was I fun enough? And it's just like, oh, this is all that needs to stop. It's just this questioning that's going on. And you touched on guilt and shame, and I really want to hit these because a large part of this audience is self-proclaimed people pleasers, and me being a recovering people pleaser myself is you talked about this root core of shame, and can you tell us a little bit more about like where shame and guilt comes from? Like, as a hypnotist, what I explain is like, this is not something we're born with, it's something more we're taught, and it's kind of installed into us, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So shame is a normal emotion, right? But codependents have something called toxic shame. The real term for it, that's a popular term, is internalized shame. And it starts in childhood in most cases. And often it's because parents have shamed you directly.
Yeah.
Horrible things I've heard from clients, like their parents said, well, you were a mistake, or I wish you hadn't been born, or I wish you had been a boy or a girl, or things like that. But there's many more subtle ways of shaming a child when you ignore their needs. In my case, I had a narcissistic mother, and if I went to her with my feelings, she would basically tell me I shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling. I should be feeling something different, or she'd laugh at it. Like, why am I worrying about that? I shouldn't have that feeling. So that's shaming your feelings, which is a very connected to who we are, our feelings, right? Or telling you don't have those needs, or just ignoring your needs. I've had clients who would reach out to hug a parent who would pull away, or just be maybe the parent is uncomfortable with closeness and touch, and it's even unconscious. But the child, and as a baby, would feel like the parent stiffen up or pull away. Yeah. So when we're very young, we internalize those. We don't realize that our parent has a problem. We think there's something wrong with us.
Right.
So, or if your parent is scolding you all the time or telling you or overcorrecting you, is very common. Like, don't do it this way, do it that way. You did it wrong. Why? You're making mistakes. Why did you get a B? Why didn't you get an A? So it's really shaming a child, or, why are you playing the violin? Why aren't you playing football, to a child? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So, or constantly correcting your body, like, oh, you're putting on weight, you're going to get fat. Maybe it's a parent's issue. They're projecting it onto the child. Or there's a family secret. There's addiction that we can't talk about. Or there was an affair or criminality or mental illness. So the whole family has shame about that, and it's picked up. Or having very high expectations for your child. So you're never quite doing good enough. If you behave, that's just taken for granted, and there's always pointing out what you're doing wrong. So those are some ways that it gets started. It may be that just there were too many children. It's not in neglect, intentional neglect or abuse. It's just maybe there were, 5 other siblings, and your mother didn't have time for you. So you take that as like, I guess I'm not important.
Yeah.
So that's a real underlying feeling of codependency, is like, I don't matter. My needs aren't important. So I'll let somebody else, I want to help other people and take care of them. And codependents neglect themselves, and they are always like sacrificing their needs or wants for someone else. So I'll do what you want to do. Whatever you say, it's okay. I'll go along with what you want.
Yeah.
And a corollary to that, which I didn't mention, dependency is a key symptom, obviously. And so that means that maybe you are uncomfortable alone, or more predominantly is that you have trouble initiating things on your own. I say, like, codependents lost their mojo. So unless someone gives you an assignment, or you're at work and you're told to do this or that, or take a class, or you have a friend to do something with, often codependents have trouble initiating action, or starting a project and carrying it through without either being told to do it, being part of some structure and organization, or having a partner or a friend to do it with.
Yeah. Wow. Like, just as you were talking, I was like having flashbacks. I remember, for me personally, like, I feel like maybe learned helplessness is kind of connected to this as well. Like, this child learns to reach out and then doesn't get, maybe any feedback from the mother or father. And it's not because anyone's bad or good, right? It's just maybe the phone rang and the mother walked away, or maybe something else caught her attention, or maybe she never came over when the child was crying out. Right. And just sort of that invalidation starts to, create this habit of second guessing. Okay, maybe, do I really need help? Am I really important? Do I really matter? And it's like there's this experience going on outside here, and we're so busy analyzing this. There's the connection to the self is just really, it's just such a gray area. Like, I know me personally, I had no idea who I was. And I had to just start to discover that in my 20s. Kind of like what you said when you were being asked to speak. I remember, times where somebody would ask me about myself, like my favorite song, or what's my favorite show, and I would freeze because I'm like, oh, what's the right answer here? What's the right answer?
Yeah.
What is the answer everyone wants to hear? Right.
Yeah. And, good parents can be too helpful. So I've had clients that their parents help them do their homework all the time and write papers. And so they come away thinking like, and they got A's, and they think I guess it's because, my father helped me.
Yeah.
Or I can't do it on my own. Or one patient, like, her parents spent a lot of money on tutors and help. And so they really tried to help their child, but the child was feeling like incompetent on their own. So it doesn't mean that your parents are necessarily you know, narcissist or mean to you, things like that. But inevitably, we're going to experience shame and rejection as a child. But when it's a consistent pattern, or chronic, when it's chronic, or when it's really severe, you know, that something trauma happens, or severe abuse or something, then it creates this internalized shame. And for some people, they're not aware of it, like I wasn't aware of it. Actually, it came to me in a dream telling me that I didn't know this part of me that had all this shame.
Wow.
And other people, they're living it every day. And you can see it in their posture. In a group, they're kind of on the fringes. They don't talk to people. Their posture is kind of rounded. And so actually, I think people naturally withdraw from a person like that. And so it reinforces their feeling of alien. You know, shame is so painful because we feel like we're less than human, that we're aliens and everybody else is normal. And but there's something wrong with us. That's really the difference between embarrassment and shame. Embarrassment, everybody has forgotten a name or something like that. But when it's shame and we feel like it's unique to us, it's actually called narcissistic shame. It's nothing to do with narcissism. It's just like we're uniquely bad. And because there's also class shame and like, which is not just class, but it could be because you're a minority or part of an ethnic group or something. And with shame comes guilt and fear and a lot of anxiety. I call it shame anxiety because we're afraid of re-experiencing it. So you might have, when you go out on a first date, or you're going to be speaking publicly or something, you might have all this anxiety. And it's really shame anxiety that people are going to judge you. Mm-hmm. That's what shame anxiety is. And that's the biggest anxiety that codependents have, is like looking foolish or making mistakes or being abandoned, being judged. Those are all elements of shame anxiety. And it might be focused on one thing, your weight or your looks or your intelligence, or for a man, it might be his income, you know, or physical strength, or his athletic prowess, because we have cultural ideals for genders, or whether you're some women feel ashamed that they don't have children.
Yeah,
that's the sign, or that they're not married, so that they feel like they're like an old maid, or it's a sign that something's wrong with them.
Yeah. You know,
expectations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I hear a lot of this with clients in my office, and you know, you keep hitting on this word narcissist, and you know, I know this word is thrown around so much today, and I see it on social media. That person's a narcissist. That person's a narcissist, and well, you know, I think what's true is we all have tendencies, right? We all have selfish tendencies, and that's healthy, and that's what keeps us alive, right? Is to put ourselves first, but it can get to a place where it's at the cost of others, right? Can you touch briefly on like what is a narcissist, and the difference between like a personality disorder versus just maybe someone who has like tendencies? Because this is something I know these type of people keep reopening these wounds, right? For people who are codependents.
Well, narcissism is a whole other topic, but it's a personality disorder, which means that it's pervasive, starts early in life, and research has shown about 50% of it is genetic.
Wow.
And the other 50% is parenting, or they could call it environmental, because they've done twin studies. And it's something more than being selfish or arrogant. So a lot of codependents think, oh, my partner or friend is so selfish. It may be a sign that you're too selfless. You know, you're not being narcissistic enough. Yeah. Because a narcissist, some of the 3 core symptoms that they have to have is that they need a lot of attention and admiration, and they have a sense of grandiosity, that they're bigger and better than everyone, and you know, they're just beyond, they're the best of everything. And it may not be that they've achieved that. It might be their fantasy, because there's something called a covert narcissist, and they're not as extroverted as you might think of a public figure who's very loud and bragging all the time. But they keep it to themselves, but they'll feel like they're undiscovered. They're this undiscovered genius or this undiscovered talent that's better than everybody. I knew a man once, he was a painter, and he never would show his paintings, but he thought he was the best. And
Wow.
he kept them all in his house and thought that they were too good for everybody else. So there's that. And then a core thing is lack of empathy.
Yes, exactly.
And the more aggressive, aggression isn't one of the symptoms, but often aggression is a defense that favorite defense of narcissists, projection and aggression. And the more aggressive a narcissist is, the worse their narcissism. So narcissism, like codependency, exists on a continuum. So from mild to severe, the more severe it starts looking like sociopathy, which would be like antisocial behavior, criminal behavior, malice, cruelty. I remember in first grade, there was a boy that strung a cat up on a clothesline. And I thought that was so cruel. Mm-hmm. So cruelty to animals, things like that might be a sign. But then they need to have other traits too, 5 altogether. So maybe they also need to feel entitled. That's one of the symptoms, or exploiting other people, or they'll only associate with high status people. So going back to what I said, just because someone's selfish or they think they're better than other people, that doesn't make them a narcissist.
Yeah.
And there's something called subclinical narcissism, where you might have some narcissistic traits, but not full-blown disorder. And maybe you can be taught or explained to empathize. So if you tell the person, well, if this happened to you, how you would feel. And so then they can identify. And you explain like how the impact of what's happening, and they can start to identify with it. So they're capable of empathy when in certain situations, probably more often when their defenses aren't triggered. So maybe if it doesn't involve them, they can empathize with a neighbor or someone. They don't feel like they're going to be, because narcissists have a lot of shame underneath. It's like a bully, and they have to think that they're better and shame other people because they feel so less than. So I'm going to feel better than, so I don't feel so low. So they're very sensitive to criticism, even though they dish it out all the time.
Yeah.
So if they don't feel threatened, in other words, if it's not maybe in an intimate relationship, they might be able to empathize, maybe with their child, or this is someone who's subclinical, not a narcissist.
Yeah.
So it's easier for them to empathize maybe with a sibling or a neighbor or something than with you as a partner, because then they're going to feel, when you tell them that you hurt my feelings, they're going to feel criticized.
Exactly. So. Yeah. And fortunately, it's very hard. I know me personally to have a relationship with this type of person. And it doesn't mean that, and if you're involved with one, it means that there's something you need to work on too, is what I'm hearing you saying as well. So it's really interesting that you said that was genetic. I think empathy is a gene, if I understand this correctly. Is that right? Empathy is
I don't know that it's a gene, but I know that I've read about studies where they show that it's learned at a certain window, a developmental window.
Yeah.
It's part of learning. So a parent is responding, one of the key ways to developing a self is having a parent mirror you. So the baby is happy, and so the mother is smiling and happy, and the baby is sad, and so the mother's saying, oh, intending to the baby, comforting it. And as the baby learns language, you're saying, oh, you're sad. And so you're giving feedback, you're mirroring, you're like a mirror for the child. And that's how they develop a self. So when you don't have that, you could grow up codependent, right? You have to now adapt to the parent if the parent isn't adapting to you and your needs. So getting back to the shame and codependency, every child needs to feel like both parents want a relationship with them for who they are, not what the parent wants them to become or be. So it's not conditional love based on your performance. Like if you're an athlete, I'll be so proud of you, or if you get A's, or if you are like so beautiful or whatever, then I'm proud of you. No, I want to be with you, talk to you, hang out with you, interested in you because of who you are, not because what I want. So a lot of times, if you have a parent who's not like that, you figure out, well, I guess I'm going to get love if I do what my parent wants, if I'm going to adapt to what my parent wants. And then you get molded and you lose who you are. So I had this narcissistic mother who tried to raise me like I was like her doll, that she wanted to model me to model after her ideal of how I should behave. And I guess I started doing that at a very early age and started losing like in touch with who I was, because it was just, I didn't know better. That's how I developed. And so then you have other people who rebel. And sometimes you have one sibling who's like compliant and one that's rebels. So I'm not going to be anything like my mother wanted. But that doesn't mean they don't become codependent, because now they're just doing the opposites. So.
Exactly. Like there's no like vertical growth here. It's just like, there's just like, well, I'll just do different things. That's not.
It's still not who I am. So, it's sort of like, I always think it's funny, like if you have a conundrum, if your narcissistic parent, for instance, wants you to marry somebody who you really like. So if you're trying to rebel, but you like the person, now you have a conflict because you don't want to please your parent. Yeah. You might end up going against what you want or what's good for you. So
exactly. And it ends up impacting your health. And that's what happened to me. My weight was always impacted by trying to, putting myself aside to do it and please others. And it was all about doing. And what I like to say to my clients, and I don't know where I got this from, so I'm probably discrediting someone here, but we're not human doings, we're human beings, right? And it's not about doing to earn love and earn attention and earn respect. And there shouldn't be that earning. And if it feels that way, then that's where that inner work needs to come in. And and speaking of that, as we wrap up here, I feel like you have so many great resources when it comes to self-esteem and taking control of what may feel like depression, and this guilt and the shame that you talk about, that really is the core of this work for long-term change. I know they can visit your website, whatiscodependency.com. And subscribe to your email list, and we'll put a link below this video so everybody can grab that. And you also have some materials there as well, the 10 steps to self-esteem, which I want to read. I'm really excited about this. That talks about like self-criticism, right? How to change that internal dialogue, which is a lot of work that we do.
Yeah. And by the way, I have a webinar on assertiveness and self-esteem also. If you rather listen to the audio or visual rather than reading, and treating shame. So, but people could use it with themselves too, because it goes more in depth on how you treat shame.
Beautiful. Yes. I mean, so needed today. I mean, this is, I feel like, is the real epidemic here. So Darlene, thank you so much for joining us in this interview series. I know this is going to resonate with a lot of this audience. So
thank you very much.
Please.
For inviting me.
Sure. Thank you so much again. And, please check out her website at whatiscodependency.com. She's got a mailing list there. I've already gone through the blog, and a lot of it resonates with me. If you're a recovering people pleaser, or maybe you find yourself, hey, I sound like a codependent and I'm getting involved with people who are just unavailable. This is such a great resource. And take advantage of this. It's a lot of free content that's out there. And if you want more, just please get in touch with Darlene. Check out all her work. I mean, it's life-changing. It's transformation. Real transformation.
Well, there is a blog there on Are You a People Pleaser? And just one comment about that.
Mm-hmm.
I go into it more in my book, is that it's fine to please people, to be kind. The problem with it when it becomes codependent is when you feel you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So when it becomes a compulsion and you're afraid to say no, or you don't have a clue what you want. So
yeah.
So that's the difference, really.
Yeah. Yep. And thank you for clearing that up. I feel like I need to learn more about this too, because I know in that situation I would get paralyzed and there's panic. Check out Darlene's website. We'll put a link below this video. But Darlene, thank you again so much for your time.
Okay. You're welcome. Bye-bye.